Hello one and all, this is Soulful Lordy, James Bullock, once again with another video game first impressions. This time around, Spider-Man 2, exclusively for the PlayStation 5. Spider-Man 2 is not only the sequel to the 2018 classic that is Marvel's Spider-Man, but also the follow-up to Spider-Man Miles Morales that came out in 2020 right as the PlayStation 5 dropped, though it was a cross-generational game. This is exclusive to the PS5 and it is built from the ground up with the tech in mind. From a gameplay perspective, a majority of what you experienced in those previous two games, the foundation that was established in those games, follows on with this game as well. From the immaculate web slinging to the point that you can do tricks in midair, where you can mix punches and kicks alongside shooting webs, pulling off special abilities and dodges to get around those enemies' attacks. With dodging and landing those attacks, you build up your focus meter, and with that focus meter you can either heal or perform a finishing attack. And just like the previous games where you're working alongside an ally, you are able to pull off tag team finishers. But one of the more interesting aspects is the fact that because you're playing both as Spider-Man and Miles Morales, you can switch back and forth. And when you're in the middle of, say, a random crime that comes up as you're moving throughout New York, you may actually find that Spider-Man Miles or Spider-Man Peter is actually trying to stop the crime. So you will have a random team up and be able afterwards to celebrate by pointing at each other and doing the Spider-Man meme. But there is something that actually has been added to the gameplay to differentiate it from the previous two games, and that is the parry system. Using your spider sense, you're able to hit the L1 button, and that will allow you to block an attack and parry it if you hit it at the right time. And by using the parry system, you're able to knock back enemies and of course leave them open for a counter attack, which is perfect because you are able to utilize your special abilities as well. And just like the previous Spider-Man games, the heroes cannot take a lot of damage. They get hit hard. So you have to perfect your dodging, you have to use that parry system to the best of your abilities to avoid losing a lot of health very quickly. All of these special abilities are connected to a cooldown meter. For Spider-Man, you can utilize your spider arms to not only catapult enemies, but also speed forward like a missile, or electrify them. For Miles, it's rooted in his venom powers that we saw in the previous game, including the ground shaker where he jumps up and hits the ground and propels enemies, or electrifying them with a chain lightning attack. As expected, these abilities can be upgraded, and they actually can be switched out for other upgrades that are associated with that button combination. And that ties more into the Peter Parker aspect of Spider-Man than Miles Morales, because as we know with this game, Peter Parker and the symbiote become one, and this gives him venom powers of his own. So you can actually switch out his original barrage special ability attack for the venom punch, where the symbiote slings out a powerful punch with his gigantic arm. Now, as I noted, there are a few reductions when it comes to this game compared to the original two. From the perspective of the original Spider-Man, there are no specific abilities associated with the suits like they were in the previous game, which was something that also was changed in the Miles Morales game. So a lot of the abilities, the special moves that we had with Spider-Man and Marvel Spider-Man are no longer available in this game, which is a little bit disappointing. All of the suits are now just cosmetic only, with more flair and style to them and color palettes that are able to be purchased with the tech points that you find throughout the city, or stopping crimes or finishing certain missions, alongside some other various currency like tokens or hero tokens that you get for once again completing certain activities. There's also a reduction in the gadgets in correlation to both Peter Parker Spider-Man and Miles Morales'. For example, we don't have the ability to shoot holograms as Miles Morales with the gadget that he had in his standalone game to make holograms that enemies would attack instead of Miles himself. And once again, Spider-Man in Peter Parker's version doesn't have, say, the spider bot that you can send out during a battle to electrify enemies. So there is some disappointing aspects when it comes to the gameplay. It's only disappointing because of what we had in the previous games that we no longer have here. But there are quite a few nice gadgets that are available throughout the game that you can also upgrade, including the web shooter a ricochet web shooter that will of course bounce off each enemy and cover them with web, a gigantic tether that can grab up to 4 enemies at the start. It can be upgraded once again to grab even more enemies and pull them together to knock them around and leave them open for some devastating combos. Now going back to the suits, while the suits are mostly cosmetic only, they do have upgrades that are associated with combat and even traversal. Once again, with the currency, the tech points, the hero coins, the city tokens, and all those kind of things, you're able to upgrade your health, your damage, your traversal abilities. That actually isn't associated with just one character, which I thoroughly enjoy. Just like the gadgets, the suit upgrades are completely associated with both characters. So when you upgrade everything with the suits and the gadgets, it's connected to both characters instead of being separate, like for example, the skill tree itself. Now, there are 3 different skill trees. One skill tree is associated with the Spider-Man Peter Parker version of abilities, another for Miles Morales, and then there's a combo skill tree where you're able to pretty much relearn some of the abilities that you had in the previous games, including being able to finally throw the heavy set individuals, or in the case of this game, performing parries, actually recharging not only your focus meter but also your ability meters. So there are quite a few different things they've added but also have taken away from the previous games that may feel a little redundant if they hadn't removed them. Now from a narrative perspective, as noted, this takes place after the events of both Marvel Spider-Man and Miles Morales, but it doesn't rest in the fact that it is also just present day. We get flashback sequences featuring Peter Parker as a young high school student trying to figure out his way throughout not only New York but also learning how to be Spider-Man. But also in the present, we have Miles Morales emphasizing his love for his community and trying to be the best person he can be. Not just the best superhero, but the best person he can be. Harry Osborn is able to come back into the scene, and he's responsible for introducing the symbiote into the entire narrative. Mary Jane is still trying to become a world-renowned journalist, and thankfully her stealth sections are a little bit more enjoyable this time because she has a taser. And then there is Kraven, who initially is on the hunt for some of the biggest baddies and supervillains who are being held on the raft. But eventually he discovers that he has a greater prey, and that is Spider-Man himself, or the symbiote Spider-Man. Very similar to the Marvel Spider-Man and very similar to Miles Morales, going through the missions feels exhilarating a majority of the time, and you will find yourself blasting through the main story if you do not slow down, because it is so enjoyable you want to know what's about to happen next. But one of the big things to help slow players down from blasting through the story, especially if they want to get 100% completion, is the fact there is a lot of things to do. There are various collectibles like spider bots that can be found at various points, caches that have been hidden around the city that have tech points that are needed, of course, to upgrade the various objects that you have in your inventory, random crimes, some combat-based time trials featuring Mysterio, and of course discovering criminal forts where you're able to take down enemies both silently and brutally. But one of the most impressive things about going throughout New York is not only the ability to see what's going on around you so much better than you could in the previous 2 games, but also the traversal itself. The web slinging is still fantastic, but now you have a new tool in your inventory to move around New York City, and that is the wingsuit. Just like it sounds, it's a wingsuit. You're able to hit the triangle button and open up your wings and just soar throughout New York City. This also gives way to the introduction of wind tunnels, so you can add some speed to your flight. And it just adds so much more to the fact that it is so fun just moving around New York as Spider-Man, no matter which one you're playing as. Now, reaching 100% completion isn't necessary, but if you do not feel like going throughout the entire city just web slinging and flying around, you will have to do certain things like stopping those random crimes or finishing certain activities to try to increase the level that is associated with each district, with each borough of New York City, because you have to get up to level 2 of completion of each district to unlock the fast travel into that district. Now, once you unlock fast travel, there is no subway, there is no loading screen. It is instantaneous. It is ridiculously quick how fast you can move from one end of the map to the other through fast travel. Technically, the game is a little rough around the edges at times. I haven't had a grandiose amount of issues throughout the entire time that I've played thus far, but I've had some standout issues, including during the first boss battle against the Sandman, where you switch to Miles Morales, and when I switched, Miles got stuck, and he just kept looping up and down like he was web slinging, and nothing was happening. I had to restart the checkpoint, and thankfully it just put me right back at the beginning of that section. I was able to go through it without any issues. But I've had a couple of hard crashes, specifically during those Mysterio missions, which are time-based and very frustrating to lose all of your progress. Graphical glitches here and there and hit detection issues. Of course, very similar to the previous two games, especially in more enclosed areas. The camera can get a little too wonky and get really close and make it impossible to see where your character is, especially when you're trying to avoid being punched or shot. And I know there has been talk about some counting errors, some glitches where certain completed activities haven't been counted properly, which may lock you out of 100% completion. So it is imperative at this time to make those hard saves to ensure that you do not lose progress. Overall, Spider-Man 2 is a fantastic offering that sticks with the core concepts of what made the previous two games great, while mixing and matching some of the aspects from those games, taking away a little bit, giving some, adding to it to try to make it the most efficient game possible. The biggest woes when it comes to this game thus far are some of the hit and miss technical issues that may or may not affect you depending on how everything goes. It's just very much luck based, apparently. But when everything's working, this is one of those games that makes you smile as you play it. It makes you want to see how the story plays out because of the characters being so endearing or so vicious. And there's a lot of stuff that, though rooted kind of in the last two generations of gaming when it comes to open world content, still doesn't feel like it's overbearing, like it's too much. They hit a sweet spot when it comes to the amount of stuff to do without making you feel like you have to slog through it to get 100% completion. It's hard to give a bigger recommendation for this, especially if you enjoyed the previous two games in the franchise. If you didn't enjoy the previous two games, I don't see why you would even bother with this, but still I would give it a chance because in a lot of ways, Marvel Spider-Man 2 is everything that you enjoyed about Marvel Spider-Man and Miles Morales, just bigger and better. So there you have it. This has been Soulful Lordy, James Bullock, once again with another video game first impressions. Marvel Spider-Man 2, exclusively for the PlayStation 5. Now, if you don't mind, Miles has to help get the class ready for homecoming, and Peter has to help his best friend do some science work. But once they put their spider suits on and team up again, all of the enemies, villains, fire breathers, and everything else will have no choice but to say, "Oh Lordy."